present your closing argument.
So, as you can see, it's a very difficult case. But before we close off, I want to mention that Michael Brown was shot 6 times. 6 times. What would cause a police officer to fire upon an unarmed man 6 times? If he were intent to kill, you would only need 1 shot to kill him. And also, Michael Brown was shot trying to surrender and running away. Would that be an intimidation factor? Would someone running away from a police officer, would that be an intimidating person? I don't have a gun. Please stop shooting me. These were Michael Brown's last words before he coughed up blood. Killed by Darren Wilson. The child Michael Brown was shot and killed 6 times. 6 times. What morality allows you to get shot 6 times? He was killed without exactly knowing why. His family demands justice. But how can they? They're faced against such a high power. They may never receive justice. Now instead their family may just talk to a gravestone. His father needed him, his mother needed him, his siblings needed him, his friends needed him. He had a future. Who knows? Maybe he had the cure to cancer. Maybe he was the next president. You don't know. He had a future. America needed him. Too many people have witnessed police brutality with their own eyes, planting a seed of fear and mistrust in officers. As long as this continues, the state of our nation will continue to fall until we are plunged into deep, deep darkness. And if we look closely enough, we will see that this darkness is not black, but rather a dark and deep, deep, rich shade of red from those that fell in its wake. And I think a perfect closing off would be poet Shyla Harper. She wrote, "To the person who told me race doesn't matter, because we're all different shades of color. Yesterday, I watched a 19-year-old boy die on YouTube. I watched a boy get shot in the back by the police. The video was nearly 3 minutes long. The boy squirmed the entire time. I have a fear of stepping on worms. This is called scolisophobia. I do not know if I'm more afraid of stepping on them or them stepping on me. Either way, I am afraid." The boy's blood was red. It looked like wet paint. On average, it takes paint 3 days to dry. When placed in a T-shaped enclosure, earthworms can be taught how to turn left or right. When it rains, they come to the surface to escape from drowning. I don't know if they're more afraid of getting stepped on by me or drowning themselves. Either way, they are afraid of dying. This is called necrophobia. Yesterday, I read about a 19-year-old body getting shot in the back. Not the same body, a different one. On average, your blood is blue until it comes in contact with oxygen, and earthworms do not come to the surface because they are drowning. Earthworms come to the surface because they mistake the vibration for rainfall with predator. When shot in the back, you can only pray that your blood stays blue. You can only hang like a wet paint sign. I can imagine that when a gun is pointed to you, your world begins to look like a T-shaped enclosure, which you can only turn left because there's no right left in the world anymore. The boy's arms were cut together. The boy's legs were a riot. The boy's eyes must have seen a fallen cave. Yesterday, I read about a 19-year-old girl getting shot in the back. Not the same girl, a different one. I wonder if the worms mistook her blood for rainfall. I wonder if the shooter mistook her body for prey. Earthworms don't have eyes, but they can sense light. The shooter must have had eyes that could only see in color. Blood isn't actually blue, it just appears to be because of light refraction. And I guess knowing this is like knowing the difference between seeing light and seeing color. But on average, it only takes reading the headline to know what shade of brown the body is not. I watched a person die on the internet. Over 1 million views. 6,000 blue thumbs sprouting upwards like worms into the surface. Thank you.
As my colleague Eugene has mentioned, this is a very solemn occasion. A life has been lost, and another man's fate will be determined today. At the end of this case, when the jury lays down their decision, and you walk out those doors, there will be no winner. I feel for the town of Ferguson, and its loyal and its protective citizens. I feel for the family of Mr. Brown. I understand that they are in mourning, and they want someone to pay for their loss, but ruining Mr. Wilson's life is not the answer. Another fan is hurting as well, Mr. Wilson. But the fact of the matter is, on August 9th, 2014, Mr. Brown was approached for the infraction of walking in the middle of the street, and a devoted and dependable law enforcement officer asked him to. Mr. Brown made the unfortunate decision to pose a physical threat to Mr. Wilson's life, and Mr. Wilson was forced to make a split-second decision to save his own life. This is not a case of racism, as the prosecution has planted in your minds. Mr. Wilson did not engage in a systematic search for a young African-American man. He was performing his duty as a man in uniform to protect not only himself, but the inhabitants of the town he loved so dearly. This event is a tragedy, no doubt, but the unfortunate actions taken by Mr. Brown allowed Mr. Wilson to have reasonable cause to assume that his life was in danger. And the law states that a person is justified in using or threatening to use deadly force if he reasonably believes that using or threatening to use such force is necessary to prevent imminent death. Now that this jury has received all the evidence from the prosecution and defense, it is time to consider. As human beings, we can't take on our feet to go with our gut instinct, to follow the implicit impressions of people. You fear the white man, who shall act for it, and you're too racist. You think of the defendant as malicious because you're so accustomed to making quick decisions. After all, that is what has helped man decide what's wrong in God. But in this case, those snap decisions and those biases push you farther away from a just decision on the faith of the truth. Thus, your final verdict, based on the way you have been communicating the process of information, will be. Assumptions presume a lack of evidence, and the defense has provided you with a plethora of
restarted.
This is a serious matter. It is serious for Mr. Wilson, the family of Mr. Brown, and yourself. Take your time with this. Discuss the evidence with your fellow jurors. You've heard the facts, and it is in your hands to make the right decision. But don't do it out of defeat, or out of personal conviction, or out of heightened emotion, or out of trials aren't meant to ask you to take your case immediately. They're just to ask what has been proved with cold hard facts, not emotional opinions. We trust that the jury will make the correct decision. So if you have reasonable doubt to believe that Mr. Wilson is justified in using deadly force in self-defense, you will vote for him. We've asked you for your attention, we've asked you for your time, and now we ask you what you'll do. Let the evidence speak for itself, and let Mr. Wilson return to his family and to his life. Thank you.
Case is now in the hands of the jury. Don't talk to. Go ahead.
No, you guys are going to talk about this on Friday. Please don't discuss this with any of the litigators or among yourselves. If you'd like to know a piece of evidence or look at a piece of evidence that was presented in the court case, please ask the clerks. The clerks will provide it to the declaration on Friday. Okay? Otherwise, you're in charge of finding what is just. Everybody else.